I welcome everybody who's joining. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes for our participants to join. We have almost 60 people registered, so we'll wait for folks to get on. Hi, folks. Welcome. We're just going to wait a little bit here to get our attendees to have a chance for people to join. As I said, we have quite a few people registered, and I see the attendee numbers joining in now, so we'll just give a few more minutes to get that started. Thanks for waiting. Okay, great. Thank you so much for attending what we hope is going to be a useful support webinar today, focused on shark discard reporting at ICCAT. We still have people popping in, but I'm gonna slowly get started here with our introduction. So we have lots to say today. So my name is Shannon Arnold. I'm the Associate Director for Marine Programs at the Ecology Action Centre based in Nova Scotia, Canada, and I will be your MC for today. Before I do start the formal portion of the webinar, I just want to run through some housekeeping technical points for everyone. Interpretation is available in French, Spanish, and English. You're likely familiar with the platform from many ICCAT meetings. So you can find the interpretation function at the bottom of your screen. Usually there's either a little globe icon to click. Sometimes it's under More as a menu, and from there you can select your preferred language that you would like to participate in. Let people do that. If you encounter any technical issues with the audio or visual or access, please use the chat for flagging any problems, and we shall try and address those. Questions about presentations or for panelists will not be answered via the chat function. It's just there for technical issues. So if you encounter any of those, please put in the chat. We're going to have a facilitated question and answer section after the main presentation. So you'll use the Q&A icon that's also found at the bottom of your Zoom bar in the menu bar. Well, you can put them in there at any time during the workshop and webinar while you're listening. The participants, the panelists will see those, and we'll pick them up at the end and then direct them to the correct panelist. So if we don't get up to all the questions during the live webinar, we will collate them, try and find answers, and we will share them back to you along with the recording of the webinar. So do note, please, that the webinar is being recorded so we can share it with all delegations and as a resource for those who could not make this time. Okay, so hopefully everything is working technically for everyone, and I'm going to dive into the content now. So welcome again to our Shark Discard Reporting Support and Capacity Building webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time to focus on this critical ICCAT requirement. Just a quick introduction to your hosts. My organization, the Ecology Action Centre, was founded more than 50 years ago, and we focus on a wide array of issues from biodiversity protection to mitigating climate change to advancing environmental justice. Our marine team works to improve fisheries management and sustainable seafood supply chains, as well as to support thriving coastal livelihoods that include fishing in Canada. And internationally, we work through RFMOs. We've been attending ICCAT for more than 15 years, and I'm joined by our Fisheries Program Manager, Holly Eisner, one of our panelists today. We're co-hosting the webinar with our coalition partners, Shark Advocates International and the Shark Trust. They have both been attending ICCAT for more than 2 decades, maybe even close to 3 decades. Together we make up the Shark League for the Atlantic and Mediterranean. And you hopefully know us from many meetings and analyses and submissions and contributions to ICCAT processes we've made over the years. Our coalition is focused on securing science-based conservation of Atlantic sharks and rays, especially working to advance region-wide protections and responsible management measures through RFMOs. Our colleagues from Communications Inc. are running our tech today. And we're very grateful to have a team member of the Secretariat joining us as a panelist, Carlos Mayor, head of the Statistics Department. We're pleased that we have representatives from, I think, 24 or 25 ICCAT member countries attending our webinar today. A couple of years ago, we hosted a similar webinar focused on supporting improvements in members' ICCAT shark check sheets, and we received feedback that this was helpful and that the webinar, along with analyses and documents and focused attention by ICCAT and members, helped to lead to significant improvements for shark check sheet reporting. So the aim of today's webinar is similarly to help advance the topic of shark discard reporting as a priority for ICCAT and to support member countries to meet their reporting obligations under the treaty. So a quick review of the agenda today. We have three panelists joining myself. So we have Ali Hood, Director of Conservation at the Shark Trust, and she is going to be discussing takeaways from their recent workshop at Sharks International on shark discard data collection and reporting. And she's also going to be presenting on Shark Trust's fisheries advisories. These are excellent resource guides that are designed for industry, managers, and enforcement officials, and she will share a new ICCAT-focused one that is in development. Holly Eisner, EAC's Fisheries Program Manager, will follow and present some overarching and very interesting trends that are emerging from our Shark League ongoing analysis of ICCAT's Task 1 shark discard data. And finally, you'll hear from Carlos Mayor. He's the head of the Statistics Department with ICCAT Secretariat, and will present practical guidance for members on how, where, and when to report your discard data. And with the time we have left at the end, we will wrap with a question and answer session. Bear with me as I make sure I say the things I'm supposed to be saying and referring to my notes. So I just want to lay the groundwork, do a little bit of context before I pass it to our first panelist. Translation in French is flagged as not working. I will stop to make sure. It's hard for me to see the chat, folks, so if I need to stop, come in and tell me to stop. Hi, Carlos.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, good morning. Sorry.
For those, in the background, we've been hoping Carlos wasn't having technical issues, and we have found our final panelist. Yay! Thank you for joining us, Carlos.
Yeah.
To Elena and others, is the French translation working? I see a chat there saying it's not. Anyone who can verbally say something to me would be great.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks. It is working now. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I have so many screens, it's like really hard to see all the messages. Okay, so that's working for everyone. I'm gonna go on. Awesome. So, context. Why do we even care about shark discard reporting? As I mentioned, the Shark League works to advance responsible management and conservation of sharks, making sure our shared ocean is healthy and thriving, and we can have sustainable fisheries for generations to come. Part of that work is holding countries accountable for their commitments, bringing scrutiny where needed, and support where helpful to advance improvements. So as you know, the main threats to sharks and rays is overfishing. So monitoring the amount of sharks and rays caught, including discards, both live and dead, in ICCAT fisheries is essential for accurate assessments of populations and to ensure the effectiveness of conservation and management measures that have been adopted. So ICCAT has made strides and is one of the leading RFMOs actually for shark management measures, as we all know. So just a quick review for folks, ICCAT was the first RFMO to conduct population status and ecological risk assessments way back, first to ban shark finning, first to pass prohibition retentions for particularly vulnerable shark species, and to establish and adopt international shark quotas and catch limits. So kudos to ICCAT. As you know, ICCAT has clear discard reporting requirements that include sharks and rays under Task 1 data. There are also discard reporting requirements written into each species-specific shark management recommendations, and the Commission has adopted measures that ban retention or encourage release of at least 11 shark species. ICCAT has also made strides towards simplifying reporting and supporting members to comply with all of this. However, the success of these measures and efforts depends on implementation and compliance by ICCAT members. So, I don't think most folks are surprised, and this is why we're doing a compliance and support webinar on this. Spoiler alert, there is a lot of gaps in the discard data when you start to look. So despite the regulations in place, only a minority of ICCAT parties consistently report shark discards at all. Only 19 parties have reported any shark discards in the last 25 years. That is including reporting a zero. And that number is much lower when you start to look at consistent reporting. And only 6 parties have reported more than 100 tons in a given year. So this is kind of significant when you put it in the context of the overall tonnage of shark catch for parties every year and overall. So Holly is going to dive deeper into all these types of numbers and the stories and trends we can see when we start to look at the data in her presentation in a little bit. Just wanted to give you a quick highlight. So while shark reporting has improved, and you'll see that as well, steadily in recent years, it does remain a gap. This was a key finding in our 2023 Shark League report, Bridging the Gap That Hinders Shark Conservation. You can access it through the QR code that's here or on our website. And I do urge you to do so, since the information in there is still largely relevant, and you can find some details on specific countries and species reporting that we won't cover today. But we are currently expanding on the report's initial analysis of the Task 1 discard data so we can further contribute to what we hope will be an ongoing discussion throughout this year's annual meeting. We think it's also important to note that ICCAT science and compliance reports have consistently underscored the critical need to report discards. So we're building on years of discussion and analysis by ICCAT members, committees, science, and the Secretariat. Over the last decade, we've seen an evolution of this discussion about shark discard reporting. So in earlier years, when you look at the reports, soon after the first set of shark species-specific measures were adopted, the emphasis was on encouragement, reiterating requirements, and what kind of details were needed. As more species measures were passed, recommendations in official reports became stronger, reminding parties that discards are essential for estimating populations, total removals, and any sustainable catch limits that might be allowed. And in more recent years, recommendations turned to reminders of members' obligations and strenuously note that continued reporting deficiencies are undermining stock assessments and compliance aims. So here's just a few quotes that I pulled out from the SCRS report in 2022, which had quite a bit of discussion on this. But we see these recurring themes in quite a few of the subcommittee reports, compliance committee reports, and SCRS over the years. So just a little taste there to remind us all of the context. So we hope that this webinar is going to be part of those ongoing efforts to continue the discussion and set the stage for this to be an official priority topic at this year's ICCAT and the next. So with that, I'm going to pass the stage over to our first panelist, who is Ali Hood of the Shark Trust. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shannon.
I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let Ali share. And
okay, so
great.
Hopefully you can now see my screen. Is that correct, Shannon?
Good.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of those of you who have given up your Friday afternoon to join us. It's a very hot Friday afternoon, so hopefully this will entertain you through that. And what I'd very much like to look at, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ali Hood. I'm Director of Conservation for the Shark Trust. We're looking at aspects of capacity for compliance. This is very much at the heart of the wider work that the Shark Trust does. Many of you who I do know who are on this call know us for our work at ICCAT, but our engagement reaches into fisheries issues way beyond that of just the RFMOs. And some of the work that I'm about to demonstrate shows the sort of foundational work that we're doing in conjunction with the fishing industry on identification, on enforcement and compliance, and the resources and materials that we create to support that. So what I'd like to talk about in today's session is just looking at a workshop that we ran recently at the Sharks International Conference in Sri Lanka, some of the issues and some of the draft recommendations that came from this workshop. Looking at some of our capacity building products, and Shannon already referenced the fisheries advisories, and these are these little fellas here, these little cards, and I'll show you how they can help and how they have been helping for over 15 years in the Northeast Atlantic, and how we're looking to expand that out into the RFMO waters and other party waters. And then just to very, very briefly introduce a new tool that we have developed at the Trust, our discards dashboard, and pass across then via Shannon to Holly, who'll, as Shannon said, deep dive into some of that data and information. So I referenced first a workshop at Sharks International. Sharks International is a conference held every 4 years. Last edition was in Valencia in Spain, this edition in Sri Lanka. And it draws in over 850 delegates from around the world, predominantly researchers, scientists, conservationists, some government practitioners. But it's a very interesting opportunity to gather and secure input from certain sectors, acknowledging that the workshop we held here is one of a series of workshops, given this was a very particular audience, that of researchers, conservationists, and some government practitioners. We will be hosting additional workshops that will engage the fishing industry and other sectors to ensure that we end up with a fully rounded and informed set of results. But Sharks International was a fantastic opportunity to have these sorts of discussions. And the workshop that we held, as you'd anticipate, it had a series of presentations from our panelists who came from all of the global oceans. We looked at practical steps towards reporting of bycatch and discards data. We looked at novel issues such as swabbing for eDNA in the holds of RFMO licensed vessels. And we looked at a number of aspects along that line. Really fascinating, great presenters. And off the back of this and a discussion session, we had, as you'd anticipate, a number of breakout sessions which addressed 3 very key questions, that of what the challenges seen by this sector, what answers they brought forward, and what they felt the next steps would be. And throughout this, we acknowledge that this is a particular set of stakeholders who were involved. Now, across all of these 3 issues, there were some very key themes. And while what was fascinating was some of the country examples that came forward, we had colleagues from Mozambique talking about fishers who, in the absence of understanding, had a tendency to hide their catch because they were concerned about infraction procedures. But even where the catch was legal and legitimate, they were still hiding aspects of it. So it was developing this culture of incomplete reporting because of a lack of understanding of the regulations. We had colleagues from Australia discussing how they see declines in reporting, but that isn't then reciprocated with increases in the discard reporting, which is a common issue and a common theme. There was a lot of reference about capacity and the lack of capacity, of the lack of education and awareness, and the lack of ongoing consistent engagement on capacity building issues. And so these key themes came out. One of the need for improved and increased communication, and that is in multiple directions. The need, as you'd anticipate, for science-based management and for enhanced enforcement activities. And from this came a series of initial recommendations. The first one being the need to educate fishers on the rules and regulations. This was put forward to the use of guides, training sessions, actually maximizing the opportunity for help and the knowledge of local leaders, really engaging those local leaders in the process, and bringing fishermen into the management and enforcement processes to potentially help with compliance. And as I say, these are initial recommendations from this very particular group, and these will be refined as we go forwards. We also had a second recommendation, which was that more importance should be placed on enforcement by governments, with agencies given additional resources, increased observer coverage, and new tools such as REM being used more widely. And then that RFMOs should increase capacity building exercises within countries with poor compliance, and that there was a need to commit for extended time periods to really establish change in practice and behaviour. And I reference here 2017, which is a real anomaly year in certain countries within ICCAT, particularly in the Caribbean. And I think this again is something that Holly will touch on later on. So What then comes out of this workshop? Well, this particular chapter, we need to complete the findings of this. We need to refine them and ensure that they truly reflect what all of our workshop participants were keen to put forward. We want to secure those wider perspectives by holding additional workshops with other stakeholder and key actor groups. And we really want to continue to work on expanding the capacity building activities that are associated with this. It was a very positive workshop. We were perhaps hoping for innovative, you always go into these workshops hoping for real innovative suggestions and changes, but it's also important to see if what comes back is what you're working with already, if we're not missing anything in that process. And so whilst the initial outcomes are perhaps you might consider fairly predictable, we think that it's still a very good grounding to work from on that point, because it's a huge issue to tackle this problem of bycatch and reporting, or the absence of bycatch and reporting data. Definitely something that can be improved upon over time. So here we talk about the need to expand capacity building activities. And I want to take this opportunity now to show you what we do already in this front and how we work globally with a number of different organizations in developing capacity building products. So working with people in partnership to deliver policy gains and aims and help with those obligations. And we see all of these things contributing into capacity building. Identification is always seen as a fundamental, and many people say, oh, the industry or enforcement agencies, they have problems with identification. I always think it's quite interesting. I think if you show a set of species to many fishermen, they can tell you the ones that are highest value. So I think there are ways of identifying species that may not be conventional, but will actually enable better data to be secured. But we do work to try and secure species-specific data where possible. And these are just examples of materials that we developed some years back with the fishing industry and with actually the recreational angling community, looking at species that have very specific differences, but also have quite significant differences in management. And it's therefore important that we create products that can remove these hurdles and obstacles to effective reporting. Over time, we've created products for many parts of the world. This was a piece of work we did in conjunction with the Falkland Island government and the Patagonian toothfish fishery, where the vessels are predominantly Spanish vessels with a lot of South Korean crew members. I know skate are not really a species of focus here at ICCAT, but they're a good example of how these sorts of products can work. South Korea being one of the globally largest consumers of skate, so it's very interesting to find what species are going where and in what volumes, and really work with the crews to improve the granularity of the reporting that's going forward and going eventually into the FAO databases. So these products were created as placards to go on the bulkheads of vessels, on the sorting decks, and they're in Spanish, English, and South Korean, and really helped improve some of that reporting. There have been changes within that fishery now, so we're not seeing such high levels of skate coming through, but as a concept, they're a very positive product. These are an example of works in North Africa, looking at differentiation between the two guitar fishes that you find in North Africa. These are critically endangered species. They are both prohibited species under the GFCM shark measures, and they have varying levels of transposition into national legislation in the region. They are also now subject to CITES listings, Appendix 2 listings, and the giant guitar fish has a zero quota listing alongside that. Guitar fishes are found. They have some very specific gear that they use in certain parts of North Africa. They are caught in those localized areas in quite high numbers, and the meat is sold for high value in local markets. But the meat is distinctive, and it's possible to identify that meat on market, which helps us with analysis of other market areas, other coastal areas where we might see guitarfish landed. So the point of this is that you're looking at a variety of identification materials that are developed in conjunction with other organizations and partners in those regions, and are also produced in multiple languages. So these products are produced in 5 or 6 languages, including Arabic in that region. In association with this,
Ali, I'm just going to jump in to ask you to slow down just a little bit for the interpreters.
Not a problem. So these materials are produced and are used widely in awareness meetings and activities. Our colleagues in North Africa refer to these as sensibilization meetings. I think it's a fantastic word. And this is where they bring together managers, government enforcement agencies, the fishermen themselves, and work on specific species issues that they can then take out onto the fish quay, produce materials, engage the fishermen. And we find that through greater engagement, the fishermen are far more willing, once they're aware of the status of species, to either release or report or avoid these species as required. And this then feeds into our fisheries advisory products. So back in 2010, in the EU, the UK was still part of the EU at that time, we saw a significant increase in the regulation for different shark and ray species. And what then happened subsequently was that the rollout of that information into the sector, into the enforcement sector, was delayed. There was a time lag in terms of the understanding of enforcement officers as to the regulations for the sharks and rays. This is understandable because their focus is primarily on the other larger species that have larger catch issues. But it was important that we provided these enforcement officers and the fishermen with clear information on the new species regulations. So we created these fisheries advisory cards. These are very old, very text heavy. And over the years, we produce an annual copy of these cards, and the number of species expanded over time as with the regulations and the development of that regulation. If you fast forward to today, we have a very different look to our products. And through just post-COVID, through 2021 to 2023, we refined and developed these products in association with the fishing industry. They're co-designed. And we learned that the crews on the vessels are there's many languages represented. There may potentially be low levels of literacy. And therefore, we were very much encouraged to use icons rather than too much text to drive home the message on the regulations. So we have a series of icons, which again have been tested and approved by our industry colleagues. And these give guidance to very specific elements of the regulation. These fisheries advisories are not our opinion, they are a reflection of the fishing legislation and associated regulations of the region that they apply to. We now have EU versions under the Common Fisheries Policy, and we have UK versions under our own domestic legislation. And where we do these further afield, we reflect the legislation and regulation of that particular country. So we have a host of different factors here, and some of these are more complex than others, as we'll appreciate. There are inconsistencies across the CMMs for certain species, across those conservation management measures. Transshipping was a particular challenging one. So these, from the perspective of ICCAT, when we get to those fisheries advisories, are based on the explicit language within the CMM. There is no room for interpretation in that. It's very much if it's explicitly there or not. How this then interprets into one of the species cards is as such. So this is for a specific species in here in the Western Approaches and the Celtic Sea, where we have a small-eyed ray, which has varying restrictions. So it's prohibited in these areas as indicated by the cursor. And there is, you're permitted to retain in areas 7G and 7D. There are requirements to apply a size limit. There are no closed seasons. Transshipping is prohibited. And so basically a fisherman can work through these to tell if the catch that he has is something that he can legitimately retain for that particular region. We now produce these in a number of different formats, again, based on feedback from fishermen. So these waterproof stickers are distributed to industry and can be found in many wheelhouses across the country. This enables us to deliver in-year changes. So if there's a change in license condition or the regulation, we can change that in the master documents. And when a fisherman goes to use the product, it is the latest possible version. We take this responsibility very seriously and believe if we've created a product that is set there to guide the reporting and compliance of the industry, it needs to be maintained in the most current form possible. It's also produced in hard copy versions, which I had previously. So this is the hard copy version. It's a pocket version, and that is something that's very much appreciated by the enforcement officers who like to put it in their pockets as they go onto vessels. The downfall of a hard copy is that it goes out of date and it needs to be replaced. But this is a partially waterproof product. It does fall apart after a couple of years, which is part of the design so that they're no longer used. And then there's an online platform that carries all of the language versions of these products. So you can find them in multiple languages at the moment for the Northeast Atlantic. A very positive part of this, though, is the acceptance by industry. So we know that the enforcement sector are very keen. We give briefings every year to the observer programs within the UK and have done so as well in various European countries. But the industry, and this is the industry news in the UK, regularly run features on these products, encouraging their readers, the fishing industry, to download the latest versions, to take up a sticker and to use them to help guide their reporting and compliance. We also have commissions from sectors of industry. These, again, are placards that go on bulkheads of vessels that were commissioned by 3 of our producer organizations. And we will tailor these products to the needs of that particular group and have done so for multiple organizations from the Norwegian government through to the Republic of Ireland into continental Europe. We've also produced products for various industry bodies or industry support bodies where we're encouraging the reporting here of ETP species. Again, a very valuable thing when we have industry coming to us, asking us to produce guidance material for them. So in the Northeast Atlantic, this is 15 years of refinement, very much a proof of concept. We've had significant leaders in fishing organisations. So the Scottish Federation of Fishermen have recommended these products to the European Commission, and we therefore know that where they're available, they are used and they are effective. And coming out of the Common Ocean Tuna Project bycatch meeting in January 2025, I came away feeling very strongly that we needed to take our advisories from the Northeast Atlantic and expand our range into RFMO waters. So we're currently looking at ICCAT. And if I go back one slide, I can just explain that what will happen over time is that there will be advisories for each of the major, starting with the tuna RFMOs and then going down into the other RFBs. And you will then be able to look in one location to look at the inconsistencies in different ocean basins, in different RFMO waters, convention areas, as to what the regulation for a specific species is, or you can look through. So you can slice up the information in many different ways, and that will be all digitally available to really improve our understanding of where the gaps are, where there's lack of harmonization within the regulations and legislations. And you can appreciate that's particularly valuable if you live or fish on the borders between different RFMOs where the regulation is very varied. So blue shark, for example, have quota with ICCAT, but they don't, there's no quota, no catch limit within IOTC. So for ICCAT, we're looking initially at those species that are listed on recommendation 1901, but as well as those species, there are many species of shark and ray that are caught, and so these products will also encourage reporting beyond those that have CMMs. There are very tailored species pages that we'll see examples of in just a moment, and an expanded handling advice. So there's handling advice in the current products for the Northeast Atlantic, this is expanded to accommodate additional species. And so far, they have been demonstrated to the ICCAT Executive Secretary, to the IOTC Secretariat, the UK government, DG Mare, and to the ICCAT Shark Working Group. And that's been a very valuable way to gain insight into the interest from different parties. So here's some examples of the pages. These are just being refined at the moment, and the product will be ready to go live for SCRS in September. So these are our 1901 listed species, and the second spread will cover those species that are regularly encountered within ICCAT waters. This is what a species spread looks like, and given that the mobulid rays are all under 1 cmm, we felt the need to reflect all of the potential species to ensure that any encounters that were reported were not just reported to those species you could see on the page, but actually accommodated all options for those species. We've refined the tiles on feedback from the UK government and from DG Mare. They requested that there was additional information on the CITES listing status of these species, that there was reference to the maximum size just to help with identification. These are not pure identification products. We have other products that would support that. Just what the CMM numbers, etc. are. So these are refined. If it's red, that means there's prohibition. If it's for porbeagle here, there are not a catch limit, but there is management on that species. And here for the hammerheads, we have examples of the lookalike species. So, you provide additional detail to help with that appropriate reporting. And the hatch lines here reflect the fact that there are exemptions for hammerheads. So this is not a pure prohibition because there are exemptions for retention by developing coastal states. The guides reflect the north-south divide for different species where you have different management across that line. Similarly for the blue shark, where you have different quotas, different catch limits, north and south. And I mentioned the handling. So here we have handling guides. We have new guides produced in Arabic. These are for stingrays. But we will also be adding in the large sharks and rays based on the handling guides, the handling guidance that is appearing in the annexes of recent CMMs for some of those larger species. We're also working with the Manta Trust on incorporating their handling guidance and their illustrative guidance for the mobulid rays, which is a very valuable asset. Fortunately, also illustrated by the same artist, so it will be very clear and accessible to the users. So where do we go from here? So as I said, the ICCAT products will be ready and available for SCRS in September. We are then working as well with IOTC on developing a product for the Indian Ocean. And we've had interest raised by a number of parties, a number of countries, initially through Senegal, through our ICCAT Executive Secretary. Camille felt that where you have a high turnover of enforcement officers, of observers, having a product which provides a foundational set of information is extremely valuable. Obviously, some of these countries have very large, small-scale fleets, and this makes for a big challenge in terms of reaching the whole fleet. We have a great deal of interest from Morocco, who have their new Sentinel fisheries program, and colleagues in India are very keen to see these sorts of materials. They come with challenges for accessing the original regulations, for capacity, for funding, for update, and we're working to ensure that we can furnish and support these products appropriately before we take on too many new areas. So we're just getting to the end of the set here. So the next steps are to secure input and support from key actors in specific countries, to tailor and finalize this product, and to access capacity building funds for parties. So for the party versions. So that would be for other countries. And then we're looking to roll out this to other tuna RFMOs and develop an app which will give that global access, that ability to cut through across all of those ocean basins. And we do have hope to present these at COFI in September in some form if we can get that over the line there. So please have a look at this QR code. This QR code will take you to the pages that carry the current Northeast Atlantic product and will be where the tuna RFMO product will also sit. And on that point, I just want to say an obvious thing for us to develop off the back of this was to look more directly at the discards, to create a product which enables us to interrogate the data sets in a way that's visually accessible. And we found that by doing this, it can really garner a great deal of conversation with different parties. And I'm going to pass back to Shannon here, who will introduce Holly, who will talk you through more of this aspect. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Annalie. I'll just take a moment while Holly is getting herself set up to remind folks to look for the Q&A icon, which for some people will just be directly on the Zoom bar at the bottom. For other people, you need to click more and get the Q&A thing. And you can be putting questions in there at any time, and we'll address them. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit of time for question and answers, but we'd really like you to write some questions in there that we can follow up with if we don't have time to answer them by the panelists. But do find that and put your questions in there as we go. There's lots of really amazing information coming out. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Holly if she is ready for that. And Holly's going to dive into some really interesting trends that we are seeing when we look at the Task 1 data.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Are you able to see my slides and hear me okay?
I can see you, I can hear you. And just a reminder for the interpreters that maybe take a little pause at the end of each slide or something like that to help them keep up with all the info. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. Wonderful. So as Ali mentioned and Shannon mentioned, I'll be digging into some of the data and analyses that we've been working on as Shark League. RFMOs and their treaties and measures are only as strong as their implementation domestically. Reporting of reliable catch data is a key pillar for scientists and for managers to have the information that they need in order to make sound conservation management decisions. This is incredibly and especially important for sharks whose life history characteristics and broad declines leave little room for error when it comes to their conservation. Widespread inadequacies with reporting, risk population assessments, compliance monitoring, and therefore the conservation of sharks. So as we mentioned, we've been digging into the Task 1 data from ICCAT, focusing specifically on shark discard reporting and how we can support improved reporting into the future. Our ongoing analysis shows some trends that I'll present today, but before I kind of get started and dig into those, I just want to note that these are a work in progress. We're working with a few different ways to analyze this data, including the Shark Trust dashboard that Ali mentioned. And so we hope that you can forgive any inconsistencies in the style of our charts and figures since they are coming from different sources. So we know that ICCAT CPCs are obligated to report all of their landings, their discard data, both live and dead, for ICCAT managed species, and these are clear requirements. So not only is this a requirement for sharks, which is outlined as far back as 2007 in recommendation 0706, but there are also numerous recommendations relating to specific sharks that require discard reporting. So let's look at some of the trends that we've identified. And before I do that, I just want to note that we've used data up to 2024 for all of these, as that is the most recent year that we have available. So I'll start with some high-level information on past reporting. We use the Task 1 data to look at the number of countries reporting, the consistency of reporting over years, the relationship between landings and discards, and in particular, when a retention ban is implemented, and then other trends like the diversity of shark species reported. So figure 1 on the slide here shows those shark discards reported between the year 2000 and 2024. The x-axis represents each year, and the y represents tonnage. they're broken down by species, where each color on the bar graph is a different species. And I do want to note that around the year 2010 was when we began to see more species-specific measures at ICCAT and more corresponding discussions, and we do see some increase in discard reporting around that time. Overall, as you can see here, we have a trending upward for discard reporting since 2000, which is positive. If we zoom in on the last 5 years of data specifically, we can also see that blue sharks and short-fin mako make up the highest volumes. We see lower reported discards for other species, and on this, you'll see that in teal are the makos, and then blue sharks are in pink. So as I mentioned, the upward trend is overall positive, and the species trends are not entirely unexpected. However, both might be caused by an increase in reporting, an increase in interactions, or the implementation of retention bans. So this is why it's so important that we are consistently and accurately reporting discards. We can't attribute changes in trends over time to a cause if we don't have a complete set of information to use. So here we looked at the number of countries that report shark discards in each year from 2016 to 2024 specifically. So today there are more members of ICCAT, but we use the membership from 2024 since this was the most recent year of data used for our analysis. So that's 53 CPCs and 4 non-contracting cooperating parties. So it shows the number of, I should be able to use my pointer here to show you all. This shows us the number of countries that have never reported, which is 38. The number of countries that have reported in some years, which is 14. And the number of countries that have reported in all years since 2016, which is 5. So we did not take out those CPCs that don't fish at all. We do acknowledge that there are a few of those each year, and also that not every member country that's fishing is going to encounter sharks. But even with that caveat in place, it's still overall quite low in terms of our expectation for the countries that would be reporting discards consistently. You know, that low number of 5 reporting in all years is lower than we would expect to see relative to the number of ICCAT CPCs. So this kind of shows us that there are gaps in reporting and thus risks to the conservation of sharks. Here we have a figure showing the number of CPCs that have reported shark discards in each year from 2016 onward. And again, we see this number remains fairly low compared to the number of total CPCs. I do want to preemptively note that, and we will be coming back to it, that you'll see a small spike here in 2017. And we'll go into this in more detail later, but just to note that that is a notable kind of increase there. So taking a closer look, you know, there's a low number of CPCs that are reporting each year, and there's variability from year to year. So we kind of asked ourselves why this might be. Why are we seeing this variability? We decided to dig into some of the countries with the highest shark landings. So you'll see on the x-axis numbers 1 through 10, 1 representing the highest lander of sharks within ICCAT, moving along to the 10th. We didn't include any country names here because we just wanted to focus on those data trends, but that they are in order from highest lander onward. So we see that overall tonnage of landings and discards as compared to with each other, I suppose. And so in teal here, you'll see landings, and then in yellow, we have discards, and then we'll be able to see that percentage and proportion of what those represent for each of those countries. And what we found was, I think, quite interesting, that 4 of the top 10 landers either did not report or reported 0 discards in some years, or in all years. Of those that did report, the average number of years that they reported was only 5.5 out of 9 total years in this time series. And only 3 reported in either 8 or 9 of the years in this time series. So, you know, given that these are the top 10 landers, we would likely expect a higher percentage of discards. And despite ICCAT prohibitions on retention, we're seeing that reporting here on discards in particular remains highly variable and inconsistent within and across countries. So it's likely that we're underestimating actual discards significantly. There's some nuance here, but it's unlikely that if you do have shark landings that you will have never had shark discards. So here we're moving into some more country examples. So this slide shows us two different countries, country A, country B. Again, we're just looking at trends, so not including those country names, but this is actual data. They both capture a range of years for discard reporting from 2016 to 2024. So something that I want to note here, you'll see on the y-axis that the scale of tonnage is not the same for both of these countries, and that's just because their landings tonnage are not the same. So country B, for example, has a really high overall tonnage when compared to country A, but when looking at discard reporting for sharks specifically, we see lower than expected values, and we see missing years. For country A, meanwhile, they have about half the tonnage of country B and a higher proportion of discards. They also have a greater number of species reported, and they have reported in all years. So this is a good example of high quality and consistent reporting from a country. I'll move on now to a couple of species-specific trends, moving on from those country-specific trends, and what we can learn here from the species examples. So on the top left, you'll see a figure representing oceanic whitetip. And then on the bottom right, you'll see a figure representing all hammerhead shark species. So both of these have had a retention ban in place since 2010. And then in purple, you will see landings. And here in yellow, we have dead discards. And in blue, we have live discards. So for oceanic whitetip, for example, and these are good species to compare because they have had a retention ban in place for the same amount of time. So for oceanic whitetip, what we see when this retention ban was implemented was a drop in landings, but also a shift towards discards being reported. However, there are fewer discards than we might expect given the landings, but that shift is clear. There was a change in that year. I do also want to note with this example that there are peer-reviewed publications that show that oceanic whitetip sharks and bycatch in particular is being underreported and underestimated. So we would expect to see higher reporting here, but this does show that shift from reporting landings to discards. We can zoom in a little bit more to see that in a bit more detail here in the proportion. If we remove 2010 where those landings were quite high, we're able to then see that proportion a little bit clearer. Hammerheads, on the other hand, tell a bit of a different story. We don't see the same drop in landings or the same proportional uptick in discards after that ban was implemented. That reflects how the measure works. It allows exemptions for coastal developing states to keep landings. So that's quite interesting here. The landings that we are seeing come from just a handful of CPCs, some that have properly claimed that exemption that I mentioned, and a few that haven't but continue to land. So, for me, the takeaway here is that the outcome of retention bans can look very different depending on how the measure is designed and how it's implemented. Both for continued landings, but also, and very importantly, for discard reporting. And it shows us how important it is for us to report consistently and accurately so that we can look into the effectiveness of these measures after implementation. Another example that we have dug into is shortfin mako. So for this slide, on the x-axis, we have year, as is with the other figures, and then y is tonnage. And I do want to mention this is for South and North combined from 2000 to 2024. So once again, we have landings in purple, dead discards in yellow, and live discards in blue. We kind of see overall what we may expect to see following a retention ban, which was implemented in 2021 for the northern short-fin mako. We see that shift from, mostly landings being reported to an uptick in discards being reported, and the proportional shift there. And in recent years, there's been, a lot of focus, as I'm sure many of you on the call are aware, a lot of focus on short fin mako measures and compliance, both for the northern and the southern stocks. And we seem to be seeing this reflected in the data, which is great. With particular regard to the northern retention ban being implemented in 2021 and seeing this, we're seeing that the discard reports increased as expected after its implementation. And this, in our view, is a good example of what helps to make things work at ICCAT. We see discussion and focus on a particular measure, and then we see a reaction to that measure. We see efforts by countries, and then we see it show up in the data. So with focus and sustained spotlight on an issue like this, we can start to see improved compliance. And then calling back to my mention of 2017, and I believe Ali mentioned 2017 as well, is quite an interesting year. There is kind of a notable spike here in reported discards, both in volume and the number of species reported when compared to the adjacent years. There was also an uptick in the number of countries that reported discards in that year. Showcases an inconsistency, certainly, and also made us wonder what happened in 2017 that might have influenced this. And so you'll see 2017 circled here, and this is just the discard data in 2017. And, we can see the years adjacent, but we can see that, 2016 is quite a bit lower than 2017 overall. So if we zoom into this year, we can see a little bit more from that and what it means for reporting in adjacent years. The number of species reported in 2017 increased by 4 species compared to 2016, which is actually nearly a 30% increase. With this, there's a notable increase in volume of discards reported as well. So again, we asked ourselves, what does this mean for the adjacent years, and why was this year in particular so unique? And we found that data may be related to an ICCAT-funded capacity building project that was used to evaluate artisanal fisheries targeting sharks in Caribbean and Central American countries in that year. This demonstrates the benefits of investing in capacity building for improved fisheries data, but it also heightens concerns about unreported exploitation in other years and that difference in what was reported year over year. You would expect some variation from year to year, of course, but this example is kind of beyond that in our view and sparks some curiosity around the reliability of reporting in adjacent years. That said, however, what I really took away from this example is that capacity building efforts work. There's a need for capacity to support on-the-ground capture of this information and of this data. And when we do take that action, we're seeing an improvement. I also want to note that the SCRS report from 2017 had a recommendation to continue these capacity building efforts. And, this again just kind of showcases that these efforts can work. So before I hand things back over to Shannon, I just want to leave you with a few key takeaways from our analysis. So firstly, there are clear requirements for reporting both live and dead discards to ICCAT. We are overall seeing an upward trend in reporting, which is positive, but at the same time, we continue to see many anomalies and variations between countries, between species, years. There's a broad need to improve the level of detail and consistency for shark discard reporting at ICCAT. We also note that reporting to a species level and reporting consistently is very important and something that we view as being needing to be prioritized. there are demonstrated benefits of investing in capacity building efforts for improved monitoring and reporting. As I mentioned, there are these benefits, and investing in those in the long term can help us improve monitoring and reporting. And finally, we need more focused attention and scrutiny by CPCs and the Commission. These can really result in improved compliance, and we see that as positive. I also want to note, just before I wrap here, that the SCRS has urged countries with reporting gaps to submit backdated estimates to assist in completing this information and to better inform management for these species. Discussions at ICCAT, its committees and members, they hold each other to account, and with that we see positive change. So we do urge members and the Commission to continue these discussions and to work to fill these reporting gaps. Thank you very much for your time here today, and happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A portion.
Great, thanks, Holly. We're going to move right along to Carlos so that we don't run out of time. Carlos Mayor is the head of the Statistics Department, is that correct title, with the Secretariat. Thank you so much for joining us. And you can go ahead and share your screen to get your presentation up and running. And when you're ready, you can take it away.
Thanks a lot, Shannon. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for giving me the floor. And sorry before, because I confused the time and I thought that we were in a training session. So sorry because I interrupted you. I'm sorry for that. So
no problem. No problem. That's perfect. We were just
okay.
we're just getting started, and we were like, what are we going to do if I don't think I could be presenting this for you? It's nice and technical. So pleased you're here.
Thank you, Shannon. Bueno, aprovechando la interpretación, voy a hacer esta presentación en español, que es mi lengua materna. Voy a hacer la presentación a pantalla completa. Y lo primero de todo, dar las gracias por estar en este foro en el que tratamos los descartes en concreto sobre los tiburones. Y para esa razón, pues la Secretaría ha preparado una presentación acerca de cómo reportar los descartes en ICCAT. Y se trata sobre todo de elaborar una guía práctica para estos reportes. Hemos separado la presentación en 3 distintas partes. Es un poco larga, pero intentaré ir a buen ritmo, aunque sin hablar demasiado deprisa para favorecer la interpretación. En la primera parte es una introducción acerca de ICCAT y acerca del modo de reporte. Y en la segunda es la guía ya práctica acerca de cómo, dónde y cuándo reportar esta información. Y finalmente acabaremos con unos mensajes principales que queríamos trasladar. Lo primero de todo, comentar pues, la comisión de ICCAT. Todo el ámbito de la comisión corresponde al Océano Atlántico y los mares adyacentes. La podemos ver en esta lámina en la parte derecha. Y también comentar que todos los textos básicos, la 7ª revisión de ellos data de 2019 y son muy interesantes no solo en cuanto a la composición de la comisión, sino también, y especialmente quería hacer hincapié en el artículo 4 que habla acerca de la provisión estadística, en este caso de los datos estadísticos hacia la comisión y cómo ellos deben ser compilados y publicados posteriormente. La misión principal de ICCAT es la de la gestión sostenible de las especies de túnidos y también las especies accesorias. Y actualmente componen ICCAT 56 partes contratantes, con la adición este año de Montenegro y Togo, y 4 partes cooperantes. En cuanto a las especies gestionadas por ICCAT, como se indicaba en la presentación anterior, corresponde a la recomendación 1901 y las principales especies de túnidos y similares son 26, ¿no? Alrededor de 30. También se centra principalmente en los tiburones principales, blue sharks, fin mako y pork beagle, y en el resto de especies, como también se ha indicado anteriormente. Una de las particularidades de ICCAT es que también, aparte del tamaño de las partes contratantes, es también el número de obligaciones de reporte, que este año son 186 y se distribuyen entre gestión, entre cumplimiento y científicas. Es un gran número de reportes de datos. Ya entrando en el aspecto de los datos de descartes, hemos proporcionado en esta lámina una visión sobre los cuadros de mando o dashboard disponibles en la página web de ICCAT, en la que se pueden consultar esta información, en este caso correspondiente a las capturas nominales. En la imagen de la izquierda podemos ver todas las capturas sobre todas las especies de ICCAT y queríamos reflejar con esta lámina cómo aquellos descartes pues, son imperceptibles, máxime a este tamaño de visión, pues prácticamente son imperceptibles a la visión del ojo humano, así que haciendo zoom hacia exclusivamente filtrando por los descartes de todas las especies, podemos ver cómo ha sido la evolución desde 1950, bueno, en este caso 1985 aproximadamente, hasta 2024, que son los últimos datos oficiales aprobados por el SCRS. Y en la imagen de abajo, en esta lámina, vemos el mismo dato, los mismos datos, los descartes, tanto descartes muertos como descartes vivos, como aquella mortalidad calculada o estimada para los descartes vivos en esta imagen de abajo para los tiburones específicamente. Imagen que también veíamos en la presentación anterior, y por lo tanto no voy a entretenerme mucho en ello, pero sí quería hacer ver que la cantidad de capturas supone más del 50% de todos los descartes para los tiburones. Quería también, a modo informativo, mostrar cómo se procesa la información, en este caso de estadísticas y de ciencia, dentro de ICCAT. Por este motivo, vemos que en primer lugar y sobre todo la tarea principal es la compilación de datos por parte de las CPCs, que conlleva no solamente la compilación, sino la planificación, compilación, validación, transformación y finalmente adaptar a los diferentes formatos de reporte que tiene cada una de las tunas RFMOs. Por parte de la Secretaría se recibe toda esta información, se compila, se valida, se armoniza y finalmente se disemina, bien para el público general a través de la web de ICCAT o bien hacia los diferentes órganos subsidiarios, siendo el principal órgano subsidiario el Comité Científico, el SCRS de ICCAT, al que se provee con diferentes elementos, como son resúmenes del completado de datos, tarea 1, tarea 2, tarea 3, los conjuntos de datos, algunos productos como el CAT-DIS o el FDIS, o peticiones ex professo para alguna cuestión. Con toda esta información, el comité científico proporciona un consejo a la comisión que finalmente elabora pues, las recomendaciones. Dentro del conjunto de datos hablábamos de tarea 1, tarea 2, tarea 3. Entonces quería explicar muy brevemente en qué consisten cada una de estas tareas y cuáles son los conjuntos de datos asociados a las mismas. La tarea 1 tiene un carácter anual y principalmente focaliza sobre las capturas nominales que son reportadas en el formulario ST02 y las características de la flota reportados en el formulario ST01. Tiene un carácter, como digo, anual. Entonces, aquí se compilan en el formulario ST02 todas las capturas para las diferentes especies dentro de ICCAT. La tarea 2 contiene un mayor nivel de detalle, no solamente temporal, dado que es información mensual, pero también más detalle a nivel geográfico. Entonces, en esta tarea 2 existen 3 conjuntos de datos generados. La captura de esfuerzo, reportado por el formulario 703, las diferentes tallas, las medidas de talla de las especies, que he reportado en el formulario 704, y el denominado catch-up size, o la extrapolación de todas las medidas de talla a la captura nominal total, que es el formulario ST05, que es opcional desde 2023. Luego existen otros conjuntos de datos, como es la tarea 3, que contiene información bastante heterogénea, tanto de granjas como de buques de apoyo a la pesca tropical, el despliegue de FATS para los cerqueros o la información sobre trap lines. Y también, y conviene señalarlo, el formulario 709, que habla de los programas de observadores domésticos realizados por las CPCs. Finalmente, también se recibe información acerca de los muestreos biológicos, principalmente sobre el programa GBYP, pero también sobre el resto de programas científicos de ICCAT, y también información de marcado, tanto convencional como electrónica. Bien, tratando de responder las preguntas sobre las que trataba esta presentación, llegamos ya a la primera lámina, que trata de responder el cuándo. Bien, pues cada año la Secretaría de ICCAT distribuye una circular en la primera semana de febrero en el que se solicita los datos estadísticos y científicos para cada año. Entonces, la fecha límite de reporte es dentro de muy pocos días, el 15 de julio. Por lo tanto, estamos ahora mismo en toda la vorágine de recibir los distintos formularios. Y en esta provisión de datos se solicita información del año anterior, es decir, en este año 2026 se solicita información del año 2025 y las revisiones de los datos de años anteriores. Y aquí conviene indicar la regla del 3+1, introducirla, y es que durante este año 2026 los CPCs son requeridos reportar información de, como decía, de 2025 años anteriores, y ellos lo pueden reportar para 2025 y los 3 años anteriores, es decir, 2024, 2023 y 2022, directamente. Esos datos son recogidos y se modifican. Mientras que si son de datos de 2021 y años anteriores, se necesitará también un documento SCRS que será revisado por el grupo de especies correspondientes para dictar si se aprueba esa revisión de datos o no. Es por eso queríamos introducir también esta cuestión. Y en cuanto a otras peticiones de datos, bueno, también los grupos de especies pueden solicitar datos adicionales o mayor detalle en los datos, y también puede haber peticiones específicas de datos. En cuanto a las herramientas de evaluación, una vez que se recibe esta información por parte de la Secretaría, tenemos ciertas herramientas de validación, como los criterios de filtrado o el procesamiento semiautomático de los datos, y también otra serie de herramientas que permiten a las CPCs visualizar la información que hay ya disponible en la base de datos de ICCAT, como pueden ser las tarjetas de reporte, los catálogos del SCRS, los cuadros de mando de las capturas nominales, etc., que presentaremos muy brevemente debido a restricciones de tiempo a continuación. Y también indicar que los principales tipos de reuniones que ocurren en cuanto a ciencia en el SCRS suelen ser las preparatorias de datos y las evaluaciones de stock. La segunda pregunta a responder es ¿dónde o cómo se reporta esta información? El lugar es el IOMS, es el Sistema de Gestión en Línea Integrado de ICCAT. Como su nombre indica, trata de gestionar toda la información de ICCAT en un único punto de entrada. Y es importante señalar que no solamente se trata de catalogar o clasificar, sino que también de procesar la información y validarla. Esas distintas etapas que veíamos en una de las primeras láminas. Indicar que este proyecto, bueno, pues está en funcionamiento, en producción desde el año 2021, que empezó su desarrollo en 2019. Y la cuestión importante es que el 1 de agosto entró en funcionamiento el gestor de formularios, el Form Manager y el Vessel Manager también. Y el 1 de noviembre se consideró el IOMS a través del Form Manager como único punto de entrada para el reporte de los formularios, tanto de estadísticas como de marcado, y los 3 formularios que hablan de barcos dentro de cumplimiento, CP01, CP46 y CP53. Por lo tanto, el mensaje que quería trasladar es que estos formularios de estadísticas y de marcado a partir de ahora se reportan siempre a través del IOMS. En cuanto a algunos elementos para comprobar la información con la que cuenta la base de datos de ICCAT, podemos encontrar las tarjetas de reporte, y en este aspecto la Secretaría está trabajando para ofrecer esta información mediante un cuadro de mando en la página web de ICCAT. Y voy a resumirlo mucho porque tenemos bastante restricción de tiempo, pero muestra en un código de colores la disponibilidad de cierta información en las bases de datos. La tabla número 5 habla de información acerca de la información tanto de tarea 1 como de tarea 2. En cuanto a la tabla número 2, pues ya entra en mayor detalle, se focaliza exclusivamente sobre las capturas nominales y nos informa cómo las diferentes CPCs han reportado sobre las distintas especies en capturas nominales. Otro de los elementos que también son fundamentales para comprobar la información disponible dentro de las bases de datos de ICCAT son los catálogos del SCRS. También estos catálogos ya están disponibles de modo online, han estado ya bastantes años mediante unos ficheros en Excel, y actualmente para facilitar la consulta pues existen ya cuadros de mando directamente donde se puede ver visualmente. También muy a modo de resumen muy somero, indicar que se muestra la información de tarea 1 en toneladas y sus respectivos conjuntos de datos, esto es, la información de tarea 2, tanto de captura esfuerzo como de tallas, en un código de colores que está explicado en la leyenda. De este modo nos permite ver si para ciertas capturas se ha reportado también información de captura esfuerzo y de tallas. Y el último de los elementos o herramientas para comprobar la información es este cuadro de puntuación o tarjeta de puntuación, que también es muy relevante, pues muestra en cuanto a la disponibilidad de tareados con respecto a la información reportada en las capturas nominales, cómo se encuentra de disponibles estos conjuntos de datos de captura esfuerzo y de tallas. Entonces, el código de color viene a mostrar que cuanto más azul, más completo, y aquellos casos en los que está en rojo, pues se dispone menos de información, tanto de captura esfuerzo como de tallas. Podemos ver que, por ejemplo, en las 3 principales especies de tiburones, pues en el caso de Blue Shark está en mejor condición que, por ejemplo, en el Port Beagle. Y también esta tabla informa acerca de cómo va la perspectiva o la tendencia, si vamos mejorando o si se empeora en estas puntuaciones. Muy rápidamente, a modo de resumen de todas estas herramientas, indicar que todos estos datos y todos los cuadros de mando están disponibles en la web de ICCAT. Toda la información de tarea 1 y tarea 2 está disponible, siempre después de la aprobación del SCRS. Y pueden accederla en la URL que se indica en esta lámina. Finalmente, el último bloque de la presentación tratamos de abordar cómo reportar esta información ya en los propios formularios, ¿no? Indicar que en esta lámina, en el apartado superior derecho, podemos ver captura de la página web de ICCAT en el que desde ella, desde su meeting, enviar información de estadísticas, se pueden descargar los formularios para reportar la información estadística. En cuanto al ST02, ¿cómo reportar estos descartes? Bien, en el formulario tiene muchas variables, pero he querido señalar los aspectos relevantes a los descartes. Entonces, veíamos anteriormente que la información de capturas nominales es una información anual y aquí vemos que podemos reportar los descartes muertos y los descartes vivos. Todos ellos reportados en kilogramos y, importante, en peso vivo. Y adicionalmente a esa información tenemos la información de los factores de conversión, que son aquellos factores que se han utilizado para poder reportar en peso vivo la información. En el caso de los descartes muertos o descartes vivos serían siempre el factor de conversión 1, porque sería exactamente igual el mismo peso. Y también hemos querido señalar las especies que se pueden reportar y que vemos en la siguiente lámina. Es una captura, está cortada esta tabla, hay más especies, pero si descargan el formulario, aquí tienen un enlace hacia él, dentro del ST02, podrán observar todas las especies de tiburones que es posible reportar. En cuanto a los otros conjuntos de datos, en este caso la captura esfuerzo, también este formulario trata de representar, como decíamos anteriormente, a nivel de detalle mensual y también a mayor escala geográfica, a una escala en resolución más detallada geográfica, el esfuerzo y como la composición completa de las especies capturadas. En este caso, en el caso del ejemplo que planteamos en la imagen, se ve como el Surfing Mako puede ser reportado, se ha utilizado el número y las distintas posibilidades de reportar la captura, bien sean desembarques, descartes muertos, descartes vivos, mortalidad estimada de los descartes vivos y también en alubias en número y descartes muertos. En cuanto a las tallas, bueno, pues también de un modo similar indicar que también es posible reportar los descartes mediante este formulario y por lo tanto reportar las tallas de los tiburones en este caso mediante el formulario ST04. Y por último, en cuanto a los detalles de los formularios, también comentar que en el programa de observadores domésticos, en la primera hoja hablaría más bien de las operaciones de pesca, en la segunda hablaría acerca de las capturas y también se pueden reportar las capturas y los descartes observados por los observadores. Y ya para finalizar, lamento he tenido que ir un poco deprisa para tratar de condensar toda la información, pero sí quería dejar pues los detalles principales y es pues todas las especies cubiertas por la recomendación 1901 para reportar los descartes vivos y muertos, comentar y resaltar la idea de que deben ser reportados antes del 15 de julio y también que cualquier cuestión o pregunta se puede dirigir hacia la dirección que ven en pantalla. Y esto es todo. Muchas gracias por su atención y si hay cualquier pregunta o aclaración, pues trataremos de responderla. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. That was impressive that you ended us here at 11:30. And just noting, thank you everybody, we are at 11:30. So, well, luckily we don't have any questions in the Q&A chat box, so that's good because we don't have time to address them right now. But I did note in the chat and I'll just share my screen very quickly here, that we will collate everything and we will send out the recordings. And so if you did have any questions that you didn't get a chance to send along, send them to our email or answer to the invite that went out, and we will seek those. We'll send them on to the Secretariat or what have you to make sure that we get some answers, and we'll put some key takeaways and such out after the webinar. So we do want to take this chance to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information, so go back and watch those recordings that we send out, and do send along any questions. We want to urge all the member countries to help put shark discard reporting forward as a priority topic for discussion at the annual meeting, and to prepare input in advance where possible to help that discussion happen. And we are definitely always happy to support that effort. We want to thank our interpreters, and we want to thank very much Carlos and the members of the Secretariat for participating and presenting, and for being willing to answer questions, and of course for all the work they do behind the scenes to support ICCAT members and observers such as us. And for those heading to the Spain-Belgium game and to go watch that in a few hours, good luck to everyone and have fun doing that. And again, thanks so much for joining us. If any of my fellow panelists have anything to add that I've missed, please jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to let everyone head out to watch the World Cup, hopefully.
Thank you for coordinating that, Shannon. And obviously happy to take any questions in writing after the event.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you at an ICCAT meeting soon, I'm sure.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Carlos.